enterprise, very simple. I'll give you a take-home example on how the difference between free enterprise and government control. Think about your phone. How many of y'all no longer even use a landline phone? You have no landline in your house, just cell phones. Look at that. Amazing. Now, your landline, totally controlled by government. Government tells the landline companies where to go, where they can't go, what makes them go places they don't want to go, tells them what they can charge. It's just ridiculous. All the state governments do this around the country. With all that wonderful government intrusion, think of the great innovations you've enjoyed in your landline in the last 15, 20 years. I don't have long here. Zero, none, right? Hadn't happened. But think about your cell phone. Virtually unregulated by government. Government has stayed out of the way and let the market dictate. People can come up with ideas for phones. If it's a feature that people want, they buy it. The company stays in business, makes money. They come up with other ideas. If nobody wants it, the company goes out of business. We don't take money from the ones that did well to go give to the ones that had a bad idea and bail them out because we feel bad. We'd never do that in any industry, would we? Anyway. So as a result of not doing that, the good ideas stayed and continued to grow. And now, look, man, you can write on them. You can text on them, you can listen to music, watch movies, you get real desperate, you can make a phone call with one of these things. But it's phenomenal. We would have never dreamed even 10 years ago that we could do with our phones what we're able to do with them today. And the prices come down so low, the kids have them. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I used to say, well, Trey, when he was 11 years old, he had his own text plan that he pays for, and he makes his money duplicating and putting together my CDs, so please go buy a bunch of them so he has to pay for his phone bill, not me. It's a shameless plug there, yes. Okay, so, but now think of the opposite. What if we had had government controlling the cell phone industry? Imagine your earpiece. You know, we got these Bluetooth things, you can be 30 feet away, the phone works great, right? Imagine if your earpiece, if your cell phone had been regulated by government the same way the landline had. Think of the NASA-type technology that we would all get to enjoy with our phones. I mean, it would just be so good. Your convenience factor on your earpiece, could you imagine? I mean, it would just be so great. All right, you get the idea, right? We understand this. Look, bottom line, I think Reagan said it better than anybody. This is the issue whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and believe and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. He said that in 1964 in The Speech, well, his other great speech. We know the technology is phenomenal if we let the market thrive, if we get government out of the way. Government gets involved, that's the kind of thing that you're going to get. So, what do? We let free enterprise thrive. We don't elect people that want to meddle in our lives. The worst, most dreaded words in history should be, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So let's make sure we don't make that mistake. These guys learned it well, right? We tried socialism here on this continent once before. Didn't we? Right there with the Pilgrims. Bradford had socialism. Everybody put all of everything that they worked and grew. They went into the storehouse and everybody got to take from it as they wished. And he said, this is not working. People were getting angry. People were getting lazy and saying, well, why should I work? I mean, I can take whatever I want, whether I work or not. Other people were working and saying, he's not working, but he's taking the food that I work for, and it's not right. And Bradford said it breeded much confusion and discontent. So what did he do? He implemented two things that are bedrock principles of what we have today. Free enterprise and private property ownership. Everybody had their own land. They worked on their own. They grew their own. They benefited from it. If you didn't work, if you were able-bodied and you didn't work, you didn't eat. And so they found, wow, this really works well. In fact, Bradford went on to say, it made all hands very industrious so that much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could have devised, and saved him a great deal of trouble and gave far better satisfaction. Within 2 years, instead of starving, they were exporting corn because they implemented free enterprise and property rights. Do not let this nation return to socialism and have to learn it the hard way. There's our four principles. What do you do to preserve them? I know I'm going long. Let me leave you with some action steps. The first is simply live it. Live out the freedom that has been preserved for us. You don't have to do as much as these guys did. They gave everything for us. They gave everything for us. When they got up to sign the Declaration of Independence, they committed treason. It was a bittersweet moment. In fact, Rush and Adams wrote letters back and forth describing it. Rush said, we gathered to sign our death warrant on August 2nd, 1776, not July 4th. I'm here to mess up everybody's history. July 4th, only Hancock and Thompson signed it. August 2nd, the rest of them come in the room. And here they are. They're going to birth freedom. They're going to validate everything they've been debating for years. But they will pay for it with their own lives, and they know that. The punishment for treason is to be drawn and quartered. When Richard Henry Lee stood on June 7th and made that motion, said that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, he committed treason. They even withheld his name from the journal because they knew he'd be the first one that the king would go after. And John Adams was the one to second the motion. They didn't even put their names in the journal because they knew it was to be drawn and quartered. So these guys come together August 2nd. And Thompson is at the front of the room. He's got the Declaration laid out there on the table, the silver inkwell with the two feathered pens. He looks over to his right, and he calls forth the delegation of New Hampshire. He says, Josiah Bartlett of New Hampshire. And Bartlett got up, he came forward, he took the pen, he dipped it in the ink, and in total silence, he signed the Declaration of Independence. He went back and sat down without anyone saying a word. One by one they came. John Hart of New Jersey gets up, comes forward, takes the pen, dips it in the ink. You could hear that pen scratching along the surface of our Declaration of Independence. And one by one they came, and no one said a word, total silence, until Elbridge Gerry was called forward. Now, Gerry's not a well-known founding father. We don't talk about him much. He went on to be vice president. All you need to know about Gerry for this story is he's the smallest founder. He is not a big guy. He is not the towering 7-foot Hulk Hogan type specimen that stands before you speaking this evening. What are you laughing at? Okay, he's even smaller than me, all right? I'm a little guy. This guy is even smaller than me. He's about 5 foot, all right? And the little guy comes forward, Elbridge Gerry. No one has said anything. Little man comes up, takes the pen, dips it in the ink. He's about to sign. Big guy in the back of the room, largest of the founders, Colonel Benjamin Harrison, decides he's going to break the silence of this most important political moment in history. And the big guy, who, I mean, literally was huge. He could have been a middle linebacker, well, maybe for USC, not big enough for Texas, but I mean, he was a big guy, though. But anyway, so the big guy says, I'm going to break the silence. And the little man's about to sign, and he says, from the back of the room, Colonel Harrison says, I shall have a great advantage over you, Mr. Gerry, when we're hung for what we're now doing. He said, by the size and great weight of my body, well, I'll be dead within a minute or two. By the lightness of yours, you're going to dance in the air for an hour or more before you're finally dead. True story. Only word spoken during the signing of our Declaration of Independence. Aren't you glad you came tonight to learn that? So, why did I tell you that? Because it's funny, I think. But also because it tells you, those men you're looking at, they knew what they were doing. They knew this was a death warrant. They knew they would have to give everything that they had. And they were willing to get up, come forward, take the pen, dip it in the ink, sign beneath that amazing final sentence. It says, in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then they gave it. It's one thing to get excited at a rally and sign a petition, go home and forget about it. They didn't do that. They had an opportunity to back out many of them. One of them, his son's captured in POW ships. British got word to him, if you denounce the declaration, we'll let him go. He refused. We lost more troops in the POW ships than we did on the battlefield. He knew that. He said, but I gave my word. Lives, fortunes, sacred honor. Some of them died in debtor's prison when it was all said and done. They had been what we would call millionaires today. They gave everything they had. They watched their home. Their wives, 4 of the wives didn't make it out of the revolution because of their husband's sign. In fact, Elizabeth Lewis was found at her home. Francis Lewis was gone. He was the signer. The British say, we're going to burn the home. She says, you will not take my home. She stands on the porch. They fire a cannonball at her. It goes right between her legs into the house. She still won't move and says, you're not taking my home. They drag her off the porch. They throw her in prison. They abuse her so bad she ends up dying as a result of it. These guys minted a coin in her honor. Story after story after story of them giving their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. Pass those stories to your young people. Get that old textbook. It's an old 1848 book that one by one tells you about those 56 men and their lives. There's one called The Wives of the Signers that also does the same. Teach them to your kids and your grandkids. Make sure they know the price that's been paid. Not just from that first generation that started this system of freedom, but every generation has been willing to pay an amazing price. How many of y'all saw this movie, Saving Private Ryan? I hate using Hollywood, but I got to do it because this movie had such an impact on me at the very end that I had an epiphany moment at the very end of this movie. You know the story. Private Ryan's, all of his brothers have been killed in action. It's actually in real life a Navy story, but anyway, bottom line is they're trying to get him out. He's already in the theater and behind enemy lines, and so they're trying to get him out. And Tom Hanks is the guy that's been commissioned with doing that. His name's Captain Miller in the movie, and his team's going in. They finally find Private Ryan. Several of them have already sacrificed their lives as part of the mission. And they get Private Ryan, they're just about to get him out, and Captain Miller gives his life as a part of the mission. And just before Captain Miller dies, he grabs his kid, 19 years old, Private Ryan is. He grabs Private Ryan, he pulls him in real close. He says 2 words to him, not just to him, but every one of us. He said, earn this. Earn this. And then that scene morphed from that 19-year-old Private Ryan, as only Hollywood could do it, to 50, 60 years later, and an elderly Private Ryan has gone back to visit, and he's standing over the grave of Captain Miller. And then he kneels down and he says to Captain Miller, he says, tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I've lived a life worthy of the sacrifice you made for me. Friends, it's time for us to live lives worthy of the sacrifice they made for us. They preserved our freedom by shedding their blood, by giving their lives, by sacrificing. Right now, men and women from our nation, around the world, sacrificing some of the best years of their life. Going to bed every night, not putting their arms around the one that they love. Watching their kids grow up on the internet. It's not just that they're willing to die. They're willing to live for us and give up some of those best years. And they're doing it for us. What do we do to honor them? What are we doing to make sure that here at home, we're preserving the very freedom that they're fighting for out there? What do we do to make sure we're living the freedom that they're fighting for us out there? Obviously, we need to be voting. That's a simple one. I hope you're all voting. If you don't think your vote counts, living proof right here. 1998, I ran for the legislature in Texas. 30,000 people voted. I lost by 20 votes. 20 votes. That's an average-sized homeschool family in Texas. Anybody watch 19 Kids and Counting? Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, good friends of ours. I always tell Jim Bob, man, if you just lived in my district on election night. Not a one. Anyway, so a guy next to me, though, campaign manager, comes up and says, 20 votes? Man, we lost by 20 votes. This guy next to me said, 20 votes? He said, man, I could have got you 20 more votes. Which I wanted to lay hands on him without prayer. You know, it's not. Anyway, we had a recount, though. Now, this is 1998. This is 2 years before the Florida fiasco and a big presidential recount and all that. Right? 1998, nobody knows what a hanging chad is or a recount. We have a recount. I end up winning by 36 votes and it flipped from 20 down to 36 up. And the governor of Texas at the time, guess who that is? I get the phone call. Representative-elect Green, we have Governor Bush on the phone. Can you take the call? What would you do? Take that call, man. He gets on the phone. He says, Rick. He said, man, that was close. Recount and all. He said, I'm officially dubbing you Landslide Green. He laughed, man. He thought that was funny in 1998. Wasn't quite so funny in 2000, was it? He got his own recount in 2000. And actually, think about that. 537 votes determined President of the United States. 537 votes in Florida. Don't tell me your vote doesn't count. Every chance you get. School board, city council, legislature, federal law, all of it. Make sure that your voice is heard and your values are counted. You do not get the leaders that represent the values of the majority of Americans. Doesn't happen. You get the leaders that represent the values of the majority of those that show up. You get me? So, in other words, if we're not showing up, and in fact, 1 out of 4 evangelical Christians usually show up. So if it's 1 out of 4 and the other side is showing up with all their folks, what do you think is going to happen? The bottom line is, if our team will show up, we'll win. Most Americans share our values, but we got to show up. Go.